This program is provided by Universal Genesis.
Okay, let's unpack this. We are tracing one of the most fundamental, most foundational concepts in human history, the idea of the word capital W,
Right.
from its most ancient divine origins, all the way down to why you might have to practice a specific list of, say, 500 terms to nail that important business presentation.
It's an absolutely epic intellectual journey. We're essentially watching a concept go from a theological pillar that upholds the entire cosmos.
Into a measurable, often messy set of human rules.
Exactly. The question we're answering today is, how did this grand, singular, divine concept of logos, which supposedly organized the world, transform over 2 centuries of intense philosophical work into a bundle of arbitrary, practical games we play every single day?
And the central figure that ties all these threads together, the intellectual shortcut we're using to track this whole evolution, is G.W.F. Hegel. Specifically, his idea of the logic, which we're calling the concept C. Think of it as this massive, unified body of water that contains all possible concepts and relationships.
And we're going to follow that concept C as it's first secularized by Hegel, then meticulously categorized by structuralists like Saussure and Chomsky, and then finally freed into the, let's say, unpredictable chaos of human use by Wittgenstein and Derrida.
But here's the kicker, and this is really the mission for this deep dive. By the end, you will have the clarity to see that every major thinker we cover, from the grand idealists to the hard-nosed pragmatists, confirms one unifying thesis.
And that thesis is?
Language is a game that constantly resists being a closed system.
It absolutely refuses completion. And we'll show you why that refusal isn't a failure of language, but its very nature.
Okay, so let's begin where the concept itself begins. The Bible. In the beginning was the Word.
Right. And when we talk about the original logos from John's Gospel, we need to be really clear it wasn't just a word, like a noun or a verb we'd use today.
No, it was the principle of order, relationship, meaning generation.
Exactly. The logos wasn't simply speaking the world into existence. It was the blueprint for meaning itself. It was the organizing principle without which nothing could be understood, nothing could relate to anything else, and so nothing could, exist meaningfully.
So if the world starts with that divine organizing principle, how does Hegel get his hands on it?
Well, Hegel's move, captured in his logic, it's radical. It's what we call a secularized logos theology. He took that divine principle of order and placed it squarely within the movement of human thought and consciousness.
So he turned it into the engine of reality itself.
Yes. Hold on. I want to make sure the listener really visualizes this concept C.
Right.
If the logos was the divine instruction manual, Hegel basically turned that manual into the entire ever-flowing ocean of human understanding. Everything that exists must, by necessity, be contained and understood within this massive, unified system of concepts.
So he's saying the world doesn't just show up as brute objects.
No, it shows up as the movement of concepts. Everything, existence, time, being, is a conceptual development. It's a self-unfolding process of understanding.
And this is the crucial nuance, right? He wasn't trying to describe what exists, and he wasn't studying how our brains work.
Precisely. This is the bedrock for all modern theory. He wasn't doing ontology, the study of existence, and he wasn't doing psychology. He was defining the system of conditions under which meaning is established.
He was building the theoretical machine that makes meaning possible in the first place.
Whether that meaning is divine or human.
That makes perfect sense. This grand unified system of meaning conditions is the philosophical stage. It's perfect, infinite, and complete in theory. But the moment you bring that philosophical system down to earth and try to measure it, it starts to break apart. Which brings us to part 2, where thinkers start trying to cut pieces out of Hegel's infinite C.
And the first scientist to effectively take a knife to the concept C was Ferdinand de Saussure. Saussure was an empiricist. He didn't want to deal with infinity. He wanted to look at language as a real, measurable structure.
And his insight is just revolutionary. It changes everything that comes next.
It really does. Saussure said that language is not a set of labels stuck onto things in the world. So if you look at the word tree, it isn't meaningful because it perfectly captures the essence of a plant.
It's meaningful because it is not shrub, not rock, and not sky.
Exactly. Language is fundamentally a system of difference.
So meaning is created by negation. It's like a net, where the holes are just as important as the strings.
And what's so striking is the direct parallel to Hegel. Hegel argued that a determination is born from negation. A concept A is defined by what it is not, non-A. Saussure simply quantified this. He essentially sliced the infinite flowing concept C into a static net of differences. He gave structure to all that movement.
But wait, if meaning is only defined by difference, couldn't the whole system just dissolve into infinite negation? I mean, if dog is defined by everything it isn't, how do we ever stop and just say, okay, we agree this means dog?
That's a great question, and that's where the Prague Linguistic Circle stepped in shortly after. They took Saussure's static net of difference, and they asked a simple question. What is the purpose of this structure?
Why is the difference organized this way and not some other way?
Exactly. They introduced the idea of function.
Okay.
They saw the differences in sounds, in word forms, in sentence order, as arrangements optimized for the purpose of meaning transmission. The structure isn't just arbitrary difference. It's organized for efficiency, for function.
This moves the whole concept closer to practical use.
Or what Hegel called the objective spirit.
Yes. Okay, so we've gone from an infinite philosophical sea to a static net of differences to a functional system. Now, let's bring in Noam Chomsky, who takes this entire system and puts it inside your head.
Basically, yes. Chomsky is a crucial pivot point because he made the radical choice to separate language from its social context entirely. He treated it as an innate internal structure, his generative grammar hardwired into the human brain.
He's saying that the sheer complexity of language couldn't possibly be learned just through hearing and repeating. There has to be a template already inside us.
Precisely. His core insight is that a finite set of rules allows us to generate and understand an infinite number of sentences.
So we took Saussure's system, which was external and social.
And he treated it as a Kantian, a priori condition, a condition necessary for thought that exists before any experience.
So in a way, Chomsky tried to reclose the Hegelian system. He enclosed the concept C's movement inside a kind of mechanical internal generating machine. The focus shifts entirely to whether a sentence is grammatically correct.
The focus is on the mechanism of generation, absolutely. But as we established, the nature of language resists being a closed system. And that resistance leads us directly into part 3, the arbitrary game and infinite delay.
The moment you try to perfect the system, someone comes along and says, but what about the messy reality of how we actually use words?
And that someone is Ludwig Wittgenstein in his later philosophy.
He's the intellectual release valve here.
He absolutely is. He explicitly rejected his own earlier idea that language was some kind of logical structure that mirrored reality. His late philosophy says, simply, meaning is use.
He shattered the idea of a single system. He argued that language is not one giant entity, but a collection of different compartmentalized language games.
And the most important insight he gave us was about the arbitrary nature of the rules. The rules of language are arbitrary. They aren't provided by logic or divine decree or natural law.
They're just conventions.
Right. The rule of any game is valid only as long as the players continue to play that specific game.
Like the rules for a chess game are totally different from the rules for a job interview. They both use language, but the acceptable moves and meanings are totally different.
Precisely. And what supports these rules? Not some transcendent reason, but convention, shared usage, and life forms. Wittgenstein's ultimate revolutionary declaration is that language rules are so because they are used that way. They're supported by habit, not by logical necessity.
So Wittgenstein gives us the arbitrary rule book for the language game. Then Jacques Derrida comes along and provides the physics for how those arbitrary games perpetually move and shift.
Yes. If Saussure gave us difference, the static net Derrida added deferral, the endless delay, to the mix.
We need to define his core term, difference.
It's a French word he invented that consciously combines two meanings. Difference, as in Saussure's structural distinction, and deferral, as in postponing or delaying.
So meaning is created by difference, but its completion is always delayed. What does that mean in practical terms?
It means that every time you look up a word, you just find other words to define it. And those definitions rely on still more words. The meaning is never located in a single final symbol. It's always being pushed down the line.
So that grand concept C, which Hegel saw as complete, is actually structured by difference, and it perpetually, undulates with deferral.
A perfect way to put it. Meaning never arrives at a final destination.
Okay, I think we can draw the critical line connecting Chomsky to Derrida here, and this is where the major insight lands for me.
Go on.
Chomsky's generative grammar, that internal machine generating infinite sentences, is actually the perfect working proof of Derrida's deferral.
It's the mechanism made visible. Yes. Chomsky's finite rules formalize a process of endless delay. The machine keeps generating infinite, grammatically correct sentences because it never reaches a final meaning.
It just reaches a grammatical stopping point, a grammatically correct sentence.
Exactly. So while Chomsky's model looks closed because a sentence stops, Derrida shows that the underlying meaning process, the reference system, is social, historical, and principally non-completable.
So there's the unifying thesis right there. Language cannot be a closed system because, 1, meaning requires external reference difference, forcing the system open.
2, meaning has no final symbol, deferral preventing completion.
And 3, the rules change the moment usage changes. The game, which resists stability.
That's it.
But this philosophical concept of an infinite, ever-changing sea of concepts sounds utterly daunting. How do we, as regular people, even interact with this profound lack of completeness?
That is the beautiful transition to part 4, the practical turn. The grand concept sea, envisioned by Hegel, has effectively been translated in the modern era into the humble, practical foreign language word list.
And the person who crystallized this practical reality before the major philosophers even finished defining the theory was the truly surprising American pragmatist, E.L. Thorndike.
Thorndike was an educational psychologist working in the early 1900s. He was a contemporary of Saussure and well before Wittgenstein's late philosophy, and he had, frankly, no interest in Hegelian concepts or logic.
So what was his approach?
He approached language simply as a measurable skill defined entirely by usage frequency.
He was just asking, how often do people actually use this word?
That was it. And his revolutionary contribution was creating the first influential vocabulary frequency lists. He empirically classified which concepts were used most often. This established a measurable, practical hierarchy. You need 500 words for daily conversation, 2,000 for literacy and academic use, and so on.
So, while the philosophers were debating the infinite nature of the concept sea, Thorndike was measuring the exact depth of the shallow end required to just jump in and join the conversation.
That's a perfect analogy. He acknowledged the sea would never be completed, new words constantly emerge, old words die, but he provided the minimal viable set required to participate in the game.
The irony is magnificent. He basically implemented the core insight that language is a game with practical, arbitrary entry points through his frequency list before Wittgenstein even philosophically articulated it.
He bypassed the theoretical dilemma entirely. Thorndike showed that the conceptual C's final usable form is not a perfect philosophical system, but a constantly updated practical concept index, a word list.
His work functionally demonstrated that the age of searching for these grand, closed philosophical systems to explain everything was over.
The practical reality of human communication just intervened. The practice outran the theory. He solved the problem of how to enter the game first, and the philosophers spent another 50 years explaining why his list was inherently necessary.
So let's synthesize this entire journey for you, the listener. We started with the logos as the ultimate organizing world principle,
which became Hegel's logic, the massive infinite meaning-generating sea.
That sea was then sliced into a static net of differences by Saussure,
analyzed as an internal infinite engine by Chomsky,
freed into arbitrary social games by Wittgenstein,
and finally reduced to a measurable, practical word list by Thorndike.
The through line is absolute.
Language resists completion because it is structured by difference, powered by perpetual deferral, and validated solely by the arbitrary changing nature of usage. Therefore, any attempt, whether by an idealist in 1800 or a linguist in 1960, to fully enclose the system is doomed to fail. The moment the system is declared finished, usage changes the rules of the game.
And that idea has profound implications far beyond which words we put on a vocabulary test. If the rules of language are arbitrary, established only by shared custom and constantly subject to change, which is the fundamental nature of the game theory we discussed, what does this imply about the rules governing larger, equally arbitrary systems, such as law, ethics, or even the underlying structures of modern AI language models?
Have the infinite conversation we leave you with for your next deep dive.
This program is provided by Universal Genesis.